Super Bowl 60, just a mere 2 days away. The Seattle Seahawks, the New England Patriots. We're here to preview it today on the Pump Fake. Jarrett Bailey, Todd Haley. Yeah, it's almost over, my friend. We are about to enter that deep, dark abyss where there's no games for 6 months, until we get the preseason back, and then into September. And that abyss is only growing here in Pittsburgh. I'm looking out my window right now, and for the love of God, it will not stop snowing. It is snowing again, and I'm ready for. I'm already ready to be like sweating and complaining in July in Latrobe, just bitching and moaning about how hot it is.
That's one of my things. I just cannot believe how people complain one way or the other. As you know, I'm an extremist. If it's going to be cold, give me a blizzard. If it's going to be warm, give me 120 and let me climb Camelback Mountain back when I could do it. But, I think it's heading this way, too. I'm a little further east than you, so I think that's all moving this direction. So
it's
still winter. Still winter. It's like the late winter.
Too much for my liking. I'm very much ready for it to just be. See, in like the Midwest, and this, like we get like 3 iterations of fall, where like mid-September it'll get like fall weather for about a week, and then for some reason it'll be 80 degrees for a week, and then we'll get October to like mid-November. And then from about mid-March to mid-April, it's like fall weather, like as spring comes in. Spring's such a hilarious concept because it's not real in the Midwest. It's either like, 40 degrees or 90 degrees.
I got to stop you. First of all, Pittsburgh is not in the Midwest.
People call it the Midwest.
It is not. It's Western PA, period. It's not the Midwest. Like Cleveland's in the Midwest. Don't associate.
Cleveland's like 2.5 hours that way of Pittsburgh.
That's the start of the Midwest, not Pittsburgh.
I might have to push back because like Cleveland and Pittsburgh are like tomato, basically when it comes to like Midwest stuff. I think they're practically, in terms of location, it's pretty much the same.
I'm much older than you, and never once growing up did we ever think we were in the Midwest. My father made sure of that we were in Western PA and we were in the Northeast. I mean, there's a line of demarcation. I get it, but it's past where you are right now.
Oddly enough, I used to like have that feeling as well. Now I don't really care one way or the other, and I think I've just grown accustomed to hearing it so much of being like the quote unquote Midwest. So I've just kind of adapted to calling it that.
We're doing a weather channel now. Having lived in Cleveland, having lived in Kansas City, having lived and worked in all 3 of those, Chicago, that's the Midwest. Even the weather people, you can put the weather channel on right now. They're not referring to Pittsburgh as the Midwest. They're going to say it's coming through the Midwest and then it's going into the, Western PA into the Northeast.
I'm sure the first 3 minutes of this podcast are something that people really enjoy. All right, let's dive into the game. Seattle, New England. New England's path to getting to the Super Bowl was odd, I would say, at least through the playoffs, where their offense kind of struggled against Los Angeles, against Houston, against Denver, but their defense really stepped up to the plate. They only allowed 3 points to the Chargers, picked off C.J. Stroud 4 times in the first half. And then after a quick touchdown from the Broncos in the first quarter, they didn't score again. So defensively, they did a tremendous job in picking up the slack that the offense had kind of put down. So the big thing for me in terms of how New England wins this game is they need to see, MVP candidate Drake May and that offense pick up a large amount of slack that they've left on the table over the last month. And if it means coming in the form of a couple chunk plays, I think that would be, the most advantageous thing for them, considering how good Seattle's defense is. I was talking to my good friend Matt Verderam from Sports Illustrated yesterday on his show, and he made the point of like, are they going to be able to march down the field, with multiple 9, 10, 11 play drives against Seattle? Probably not. So you're going to need those chunk plays, to put you in position to succeed against a good Seahawks defense. We'll see if, Kyle Williams, Kayshon Boutte, Stephon Diggs, if they can, make a few things happen downfield to put the Patriots in position to succeed offensively.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting matchup, for a lot of things you just mentioned. Number one, Seattle, playing the Chargers, playing the Texans. They've played some of the best defenses in some really harsh conditions. So, I think, yes, the weather won't be a major factor, obviously, in Santa Clara. So, hopefully that helps Drake a little bit, because some of those turnovers, I attribute to the weather at times. I mean, it was just brutally terrible. Denver also. So, here's what I think about Super Bowls, Jared, is, just that first quarter and a half, there's going to be nerves. There's going to be anxiety. There's going to be over emotion. Everybody's, overhyped. It takes, a quarter and a half to really settle in. And what you don't want to have happen is you lose the game in that first quarter and a half by doing some crazy bad stuff that leads to points for the other team. So, and that goes for Seattle and New England, but especially, you're talking about a young quarterback, a lot of guys that haven't been there, done that, other than Mike Vrabel, Josh McDaniels. And, to me, I think early on, it's just, be fairly conservative, run the football efficiently, which is going to be tough. But, for young offensive linemen, it's much easier on a run play than it is on a pass protection play. So I'm not saying you run it on first and second down, your first 2 or 3 possessions, whatever gets you through the first quarter, but you got to run it efficiently when you do. The good thing is, you got Josh McDaniels that has been in these situations as a play caller. You got Mike Vrabel who's been in these situations as a player. So that's a kind of a priceless commodity where Seattle doesn't necessarily have that. They probably, in my opinion, have the better team on paper, but we know how that goes. So, I would think just, let everybody get settled in. Don't try to go crazy with shot plays and things like that. One's okay, in the first or second series, but just settle in and don't allow something really bad to happen. And you don't live in your fears, as Coach T always said, but at the same time, you got to be smart. There will be a lot of emotion in this game on both sides. So just, kind of let things settle down, and then, take your shots when the opportunity presents itself.
I will be intrigued to see how either team would respond to, let's say, Seattle goes up 13-3. Is New England going to be able to, go tick for tack with that and catch up offensively? Same thing with Seattle on the other end. If New England gets up, 10-0, 13-3, are they going to really, push the envelope, press the issue with Sam Darnold? And is that going to lead to mistakes, or is he going to answer the challenge and be able to, pull them back within one score? I think that I shouldn't say myself, I've kind of doubted Seattle throughout the year in terms of how legitimate they were. And a large part of that was, okay, but they have Sam Darnold at quarterback. And I've just kind of been waiting for that other shoe to drop. And, now they're in the Super Bowl. So I feel like I can't doubt them anymore when it comes to, potentially winning this game. And we'll talk about that when we make our picks. But I think that he answered a lot of questions against the Rams, where he played out of his mind, protected the ball, made the plays that they needed him to. And not just against the Rams, but, although the game against San Francisco got largely out of hand pretty quickly, he made throws in that game that they needed him to make. And I think that he's really exercised a lot of demons himself and shown that, yeah, he's had issues in the past, whether it be with the Jets, the Panthers, and what have you. But, the journey that he's gone on has helped make him a better quarterback that can be a little bit more relied upon, have a little bit more on his plate. And, if you're Clint Kubiak, if you're Mike McDonald and you get in those situations, do you feel good about Sam Darnold having the ball in his hands, down 4, down 7, down 10, whatever it may be? I think you feel a lot more confident now than you would have, say, 2 months ago.
Yeah, if that Rams game went the way the Niners game went, where it was kind of handed on a silver platter, for a quarterback that was in a huge pressure situation, if the Rams game had been like that and they won, I would feel differently. But he went toe to toe with the now MVP of the league and Matthew Stafford. So, I feel differently also. Now, don't believe for a second if he goes out and plays bad, it's going to be the same people saying the same thing. Well, it was Sam Darnold. So he's got one more true step to take to exercise all the demons. And this is the biggest game, in the world, biggest game he's ever played in. So it like I said, it's not fair, it's not easy, but it's kind of the way it is. When your career arc has kind of gone how his has, it's just, but he goes out and takes care of business in this game on the biggest stage. I think he moves himself, as we talked with Kurt Warner a couple weeks ago, he moves himself into that category of guys that are a little different than even just the good guys. He's upper echelon. He's a guy that you can count on, and it doesn't mean you're going to win every game, but it means you got a chance, and that's what it's all about. So, this game is really interesting because, like I said, I think Mike Vrabel has the edge from a coaching standpoint, and no disrespect to Mike McDonald and what he's done. But, you saw 2 weeks ago, in the championship game, the Patriots. I mean, Mike Vrabel is on top of situations, what even obscure things that can come up within a game. He's on it. And I saw it when I was a head coach with the Chiefs and he played for me. I've told you that. I mean, he would come to me with a situation and be like, when's that ever going to happen? And I worked for Bill Parcells, who was situation king. I mean, and that's where Belichick learned it, because he was doing something that no other coach was doing, which was practicing those kind of obscure situations. End of the game, there's 10 seconds, there's 4 seconds. Are you throwing a deep ball out of bounds? Are you throwing it out of the back of the end zone? What's the score? I mean, you could come up with 100, but it's hard to cover them all. But I think the edge in understanding path to victory, how do we have to play to have a chance to win this game? In this case, the Super Bowl against the Seattle Seahawks, and then pushing that message to the players, to the other coaches. This is what we have to do to win. I think Mike Vrabel is as good as anybody in the NFL doing that. And like I said, not disparaging Mike McDonald at all. It's just I think edge coaching wise and having the guys ready to understand and understanding how they have to play to have a chance to win. I give the edge to the Patriots, even though I said the Seahawks better on paper. So that's what makes me a little uncertain about how this game is going to go.
I think for New England defensively, what would be your magic number for Jackson Smith and Jigba? Like, hey, if we can keep him below this, feel pretty good about our chances of winning.
I believe Mike Vrabel, different than what we saw a couple weeks ago against the Rams, where they let JSN beat them in a couple situations.
Yeah.
That has been the message, other than stop the run. You got to stop Kenneth Walker, but we cannot let JSN beat us. And I do not think we'll see situations. Now, he might beat somebody in one-on-one, but we won't see situations where he's uncovered. And I don't think, unless somebody blows a coverage or whatever is involved, but because Seattle does a great job of moving him around, putting him in the backfield. I see a lot of Antonio Brown and how we had to try to use him to get him as many touches as possible. But as far as the number, I've never gone into a game, as a, it's carries for the back. It's, yards rushing, turnovers, obviously turnover margin, but you just can't let him beat you. He can't be the guy that is the difference maker in the game. And that's easier said than done because this guy can make a play even when covered, even when double covered. So, you just can't let him be the guy that makes the difference in the game. If it's somebody else, let it happen, but don't let that particular player be the guy.
Yeah, and that's not to say that Seattle doesn't have other guys, but we've seen what JSN has done this postseason run. You brought up the Rams game where he just went nuclear. And looking at the other weapons that they have, like I think if you're Mike Vrabel, like you said, I think you're saying, look, if Cooper Kupp has, 5 catches for whatever amount of yards, whatever, we can live with that. If Rashid Shaheed has a big catch, all right, whatever. Don't let JSN go for, 11 catches and $130 and be the real reason why we lose this game. Like if they can find another guy to have, an incredible once in a lifetime performance, all right, you kind of tip your cap and you move on. But even if that is the case, if you can limit Jackson Smith and Jigba to an extent, you're not going to completely take him out of the game. He's too good for that. But if you can keep him from being just absolutely nuclear, I think that if you're Mike Vrabel, you're saying that gives us such a bigger, greater chance of winning compared to if we got to go tick for tack and he's feeling it and they're consistently getting him the ball. If they can slow him down, I certainly, think that that's going to give them a little bit more confidence on that side of the ball. In terms of what each team needs to do, and again, I was talking to Matt Verderam yesterday, I think the general consensus is that Seattle's the better overall team, and if they play 80% of their best, they'll probably win. For New England, they have to play their absolute best and maybe get a few lucky rolls. Again, that's just the general consensus I'm seeing from my peers and people in our line of work now. It looks like Seattle's the pretty heavy favorite amongst people who discuss football for a living. I'd probably agree with that just from a talent perspective. I think 1-53, they have the better team. I think New England has the better quarterback, but as we already talked about with Sam Darnold, that's he's proven himself to be in that class of guys that you can say, all right, we can rely on him. If you're, looking at this game, would you say that Seattle is more inclined, maybe incline's the wrong word, but as long as they play, 80% of that best football, as long as they don't mess it up, would you say that they are, the best team here, or would you lean New England?
I think, on paper, the better team. You could go position by position. That's why I prefaced, this whole conversation with, I think the edge to me goes to coaching, and coaching matters. After that, it's, which team plays the most complementary football. And we use that term all the time, but it's a real thing. So in a game like this, of this magnitude, with the emotions and ups and downs, the ebb and flow of the game, I think the team that does that the best, say Drake May turns it over, does the defense get a stop or hold Seattle to a field goal, vice versa with the Seahawks. I think that in these type of games that are pretty evenly matched, that's what it's going to come down to is who stays together, sticks together, and picks each side of the football up. Maybe it's a special teams play, whatever it is. I think that'll kind of decide the final outcome again. And I'm saying that with assuming we get through the first quarter, at least, with it being still fairly even. One team hasn't just short circuited and cratered into the abyss, and that can happen in a Super Bowl. It's happened many times. So, if you can get through that first quarter and things settle down, then I think it's about complementary football. Obviously it's always going to be about a couple defining plays. Who makes those? Is it a Santonio Holmes catch to win the Super Bowl? Is it a defender making a great interception or sack fumble? Is it David Tyree, catching a football on his helmet? I mean, these games are generally decided by those defining plays that we'll talk about for a long time.
All right, so some numbers on the defensive side of the ball, and then we'll do numbers on the offensive side of the ball, just to kind of set the official tail of the tape. In terms of defensive efficiency, the Seahawks led the NFL in EPA. Defensively, they were third in success rate. New England 11th in EPA, but that success rate number for them drops down to 18th. On the offensive side of the ball for both teams, New England's offense led the NFL in EPA per play. Seattle's offense was 14th. And then in terms of success rate, New England 4th, Seattle 8th. So let's pick this thing. I am going to, like I said, I've doubted Seattle all year and they made it to the Super Bowl. So I'm going to stop doubting them now. I'm going to pick Seattle. I think it's going to be close. You know, some people I've seen pick Seattle by like 2 scores. I don't think it'll be a blowout. I hope it's not a blowout. Blowout Super Bowls suck, man. Like you wait all this time.
It's our last game, and we gotta.
Yeah. Like last year, having to sit through Chiefs Eagles and just be like, oh my god, like this is just dragging on. Now look,
pulling your fingernails off.
Yeah. Now look, it would have been so much more enjoyable if like any other team was beating the piss out of Kansas City, you know, just because we're tired of we need some parity and everybody was tired of seeing the Chiefs win. So, you know, as from a fan perspective, yeah, there was certainly some joy out of that. But then you remember it was the Eagles that did it, and that fan base just drives everybody insane. So I hope we get a closer game than what we did last year. I'm going to pick Seattle to win. I'm going to go 24-20. The MVP of the game being, is there going to be an obscure MVP, or is it just going to be, you know, status quo and be a quarterback? That'll be. I'll have to think on that. I'll stick with Seattle right now, and maybe I'll think of an MVP.
What do you say? 24-20?
Yeah.
How many points of the Seahawks? Well, they gave up a bunch of the Rams, but I'm going 20-13 Seattle.
Okay.
Knowing what the line is, I got to get above that somehow. Even though I'm not betting.
I will be. You know what? Let's pull up some fun lines and see what happens if there's like anything. Cooper Kupp did post a picture on Instagram where he's throwing a pass. So automatically I'm taking over 2.5 people to attempt a pass. That felt like a giveaway. Where they're going to try to run some trickery where Cooper Kupp is throwing a pass to Sam Darnold or something of that nature. So that'll be something I invest in and hope that I'm proven right on. The spread on the game, Seattle favored by 4.5. The over under is at 45.5. So if anybody is interested in that over on FanDuel, not a sponsor of the show, but hey, we'll have our people call your people. MVP wise, what are the odds here for MVPs? Let's see. Maybe there's like a dark horse worth putting a little bit of money into as just a, if I can find it on here, Jesus. This is really good podcasting. I should have had this pulled up beforehand. I think I'm probably just going to go with the quarterback here and say Sam Darnold. That always seems to be a safe way to go in these things. I feel like we don't get too many like obscure. Well, who was the Seahawks linebacker against Denver that won Super Bowl MVP that game? It's going to escape my mind. I'll have to look it up afterwards. And that 43 again, another blowout Super Bowl, 43-8. Oh, it was horrible.
First snap goes over Peyton Manning's, or no, that was the Colts game. But no, I think that's a safer bet. I mean, Sam Darnold, Kenneth Walker, if he goes off, but I doubt that the Patriots defense is going to allow that to happen. JSN, again, quite capable, but I just have a hard time believing that any second spent preparing for this game on New England side has been not focused on that guy. So I don't know. Every time I come on here with you, I believe one thing. I did radio this morning on Sirius XM channel 88, and I was strong in my belief. And now I start to waffle a little bit, and that's usually not a good sign.
We can bet the coin toss. It's minus 104 for either heads or tails. If you're betting a coin toss, call the hotline. Like, that's bizarre. Don't bet on coin tosses.
Call the hotline.
Yeah, sure. Like, for goodness sake, that's too much. All right. So that's our Super Bowl preview. We're both going with Seattle then?
Yeah.
All right.
I haven't strayed. I waffled a little bit, but I'm back on track.
That's the thing. I
just don't know what it's going to look like. I really don't. I mean, this could easily be a 10-7 game. It could be a 35-10 game. It could go a lot of different directions. What does Drake May look like? I mean, he struggled in the playoffs. This is a big moment. If everything's put on him, like you said, Seattle's up 13-3, in the first half, how does he respond to that moment? So, and the same thing goes with Sam. I mean, if New England jumps out and makes a couple plays and all of a sudden everything goes on to Sam, I don't know what it's going to look like. There's just a lot of unknown in this game.
Right. All right, so let's hit some news before we get into the mailbag. Jim Schwartz sent the Browns a resignation letter this morning. So he will not be the defensive coordinator of the Cleveland Browns. According to Adam Schefter, he is now likely to sit out the season and probably come back in 2027 in some sort of role. You and I talked about just the Browns really tried to have their cake and eat it too, and it ends up blowing up in their face, where it looked like they wanted to hire one of these young guys, maybe Shieldhouse or Shula from the Rams or Yadinsky from the Jaguars. They don't get either of them. And with that, it looked like they were hoping to keep Jim Schwartz on as defensive coordinator. Instead, they hired Todd Monken, who appeared to be perfectly okay with keeping Jim Schwartz as defensive coordinator. And then Jim Schwartz gets pissed that he's not named the head coach, and now it turns into he's resigned as defensive coordinator from the Browns. Just a large crap show there in Cleveland.
Yeah, I mean, Jim Schwartz, really respect him as a coach. He is emotional. He's got some characteristics that I also possess. So I thought, he might go off. I think he's got a place down here near me on the Chesapeake somewhere. I thought he'd go there, simmer down, calm down, get it, and he did that, and he still came back with the same feeling he had. He's like, screw you guys, I'm out. And I feel for the players defensively, especially because, I heard Denzel Ward talking, I heard Miles talking, I heard different players that really believe that Jim, got them in the best position to succeed and play to their best of their abilities, which is a coach's job. So, I feel for those guys now. Complete upheaval. Not only your head coach, but your guy that you've leaned on for a couple years, is now no longer there, and these do become tight knit groups that it's hard. It's hard when pieces are now gone.
We'll see what Cleveland does at that position now. The Pro Football Hall of Fame class of 2026, 5 names will get inducted into Canton. 5 really good names. Drew Brees, Larry Fitzgerald, Luke Kuechly, Adam Vinatieri. Roger Craig gets in after a long time of waiting. Really happy to see him go in. One of the more underrated backs of all time. But Larry Fitzgerald, obviously you coached Larry in Arizona. What's it like to see him go into the Hall of Fame?
It's awesome. I mean, what a pleasure to joy to coach a guy like Larry and be some small part of this Hall of Fame journey. I mean, not only a phenomenal player, but class act. I mean, ball, touchdown scored, ball goes to the official every single time in a Barry Sanders type fashion. I mean, just, class up and down, just like I said, joy, pleasure, whatever adjectives you want to come up with. I mean, just the best. And, now happy to call him my friend. He's had me out to work with his son, who's now going to Notre Dame in the fall. So, he's the best and well-deserved. Best hands I've ever seen, softest hands. I mean, just what a player, that was willing to do anything he could for the team. So, as you said, the whole class, it's just people are up in arms. They only voted for 4 modern day guys.
Yeah, pretty
and
crazy.
Then that gets tricky as you go down the line when you start looking at who the next guys coming are. And this is a big thing for everybody involved. And I think every one of the players on there is well deserving. Luke Kuechly, what a pain in the butt to coach a game against him. He's one of those unique guys, kind of Patrick Willis, retired early but still made it. That's awesome. So I think the system is flawed a little bit in how they go about this when you start comparing coaches, owners with players. I mean, it's just, it's seems like an impossible task. Still the greatest honor you can receive in the NFL. So congrats to all those guys. Drew Brees, another class act. Those are guys that I got to know. Kuechly, just after games and things like that. But Drew, phenomenal person, player. Larry, obviously, I spoke about. So, there's always going to be people left out, and those are the guys that you just hope, eventually find their way in, because they're all deserving if they're on that list.
Yeah, Larry had. I mean, that when the Cardinals, you, Ken, Kurt, everybody went to the Super Bowl that year, the string of games he put up in the postseason and the stat lines he put up, still one of the greatest postseason performances in history from Larry.
Yeah, he didn't get there enough to rival Jerry Rice's numbers in some of those areas, but in a single postseason, I mean, we were double-digit underdogs against the Panthers, against the Falcons, against the Eagles, home and away, and he took. It's like he took the entire team on his back and said, "We're doing this." And up until the last 2.5 minutes, he was still doing it. When he caught the little under route and took off up the middle. An amazing, like I said, amazing, blessed for me to be a part of that journey of his. So, happy he got there. We'll always have scars that, we weren't able to beat your Steelers. They're your Steelers when I talk about that Super Bowl.
Right.
They weren't my Steelers at that time, but
I mean, hey, I wasn't there. I was sitting in my living room, 4th grade, just hoping something good would happen. Yeah, and I didn't do anything. Yeah, a great class all around. Obviously, when Drew Brees retired, he owned like every record, every passing record possible. Like I said, Roger Craig. When you think of those 80s 49ers teams, you think of that dynasty, you think of Montana, you think of Rice, you think of Bill Walsh. Roger Craig, I mean, you look at the way the running back position has advanced.
I think a high knees. He had a little different gait. No, they were phenomenal. Happy for him. And ironically, the Super Bowl is where in Santa Clara, San Fran. So, good for him. That'll be a nice little weekend for him coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think of the way that the running back position has advanced, I mean, you could probably trace it back to him as like the true dual threat running back that really started a lot of this. So congratulations to him. Obviously, Vinatieri, the greatest clutch kicker of all time, won the Patriots 2 of their 6 Super Bowls off his foot. So, yeah, great class all around. Would like to see these classes get a little bit bigger rather than just be 5, 6 guys. If they want to increase it to 7, 8 guys, like I said, there's a lot of people who are deserving, who have been on the outside looking in for a long while. The Reggie Waynes, the Torrey Holts, guys of that ilk who, by all accounts, deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. But as we keep seeing them get pushed back and seeing new guys emerge as first, second time candidates, it's hard to see like a clear path for them to get in, even though that they are extremely deserving.
Yeah, and you got the jump the line type of guys. Ben's going to be coming into that category. There's jump the line guys. Adrian Peterson. I forget there's a third next year, Gronk. I mean, those are jump the line guys that, deservedly so. But, then you start talking about the Reggie Waynes. I mean, I got a writer that votes that always, sends me the list of 15 and says pick 5. And, when you look at that list, I mean, it's, there's some great players. All of them are great players, but
Right.
It's hard. So to go with 4 in the modern era, it's like, why would you do that to somebody? I mean, and I know how it works. The split votes, all those things. But Reggie Wayne, Terrell Suggs, I think this is his first year. But if you ever had to coach against Terrell Suggs, I mean, he's a game changer. Everything you did from a game plan, play call standpoint, he affected it. If we had a certain play, we had a word that if he was on the different side than we thought he'd be on, we just audibled immediately. We're not running that play because he's liable to pick off a screen, catch it, do whatever. He's a game changer. So when you start seeing these names and then, what great players they were, And then you go to the older player, Ken Anderson. I mean, his numbers stack up with anybody. And he's been sitting and waiting a long time. So,
Friend of the
there's
show,
always
Ken Anderson, by the way. Oh, I love Ken. Great guy.
Yeah, he's great. I got to know him when I was in Pittsburgh. He'd come in now and then, and I looked up to him as a kid. I mean, my dad was with the Steelers. I mean, that was the Bengals, the Browns. I mean, the Oilers. I mean, it was a different age, but man, what a player he was. So, I get the exclusivity, however you say it.
Yeah.
You want to keep it exclusive, but at the same time, these people put everything in their lives into having an opportunity at this. So it's always tough when you see certain guys, be put on hold, year in and year out.
Ken Anderson told me a story once. They were playing the Steelers and they lost, and he got sacked a bunch of times during the game. He said, "But one of the times that Joe Green sacked me, he's helping me up. He's like, hey, come, say hey in the locker room afterwards." So he goes to the Steelers locker room. He's just saying, "Oh, hey, good game, everybody," and whatnot. And the Bengals are like on the bus ready to leave. So he has to haul ass to the team bus to, catch the flight and whatnot. And he's like, yeah, I was, almost left at Three Rivers that game. And that would have been a, bad PR for, the Bengals quarterback left behind while talking to Joe Green and Jack Lambert and everybody. So that made me chuckle. But love Ken. Yeah, he's MVP on his resume, Super Bowl appearance. That's a guy who should have been a long time ago. The names for next year that you brought up. So Gronk, Ben Roethlisberger, Adrian Peterson, Richard Sherman, Antonio Brown, first time on the ballot as well. So a lot of guys that, very much jump the line kind of talents. And I would like to see there be some changes to the process and changes to the numbers of guys that get in. That would be good to see. So with that in mind, let's hit some mailbag questions. We're going to start doing this every week here on the show. You can submit your questions to us on Twitter. We put out a tweet every week, or you can do it in the YouTube comments, YouTube community, however you want to do it. We'll find ways to answer them. So the first one coming from the Twitter account Tomlinberg. I love all the Berg accounts on Twitter, by the way. There's a Skoranek Berg. There's I'm pretty sure there's a McCarthy Berg now. Like all the Berg accounts, I'm on board with it. He asked, what's the most common mistake offensive coordinators make in Super Bowls?
Good question. And I think it's what leads up to the Super Bowl. You have 2 weeks. Coaches by nature, you want to fill every bit of time with thoughts, ideas, film watching, all those things. And I think, when Arizona, when we beat the Eagles to go to the Super Bowl, the first call I got was Coach Parcells, and he said, "Don't do too much." And it's basically all he said. And then he hung up. He said, "Congrats, don't do too much." And I got the message. It's easy to want to just come up with more and more ideas, but I think it's still about doing what you do well, what got you there, and don't do too much. So I think that's the mistake if guys make one is just overdoing the preparation. Instead of watching 4 games in a cut up, you put 16 games in there. That affects everybody involved, the players, coaches, everybody. Now they're getting inundated with just pictures and video and plays, and you just keep it streamlined.
All right. He also asked, what's one coaching cliche fans believe that isn't true? I want to build off that. I think Peyton Manning talked about how like the whole halftime adjustments thing is kind of overstated. He's like, yeah, we didn't make adjustments at halftime. We sat down, we had oranges to kind of get rehydrated and whatnot, but there wasn't like a big rah thing at halftime more often than not. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely. That will crack me up anytime I hear it. People sitting next to me at a restaurant, bar, or whatever, and they're like, they made more halftime adjustments. I'm like, listen, you run off the field, you get in there, the players go in, they all generally have to go to the bathroom of some form or fashion. Mm-hmm. Grab an orange, grab some hot cocoa if it's cold. And, us as coaches sit, by the time we get guys from up in the box, I mean, there's 3, 4, 5 coaches up in the box that got to get on an elevator, get down there. By the time everybody's gathered, you have about 2 minutes to talk as a staff. The adjustments happen in game. That's where it happens. You have a game plan, and now it's just about, what do we think? How can we run the football better? How can we do this, do that? But halftime adjustments, yeah,
not
so
real,
overrated. Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Todd, as a former offensive coordinator, what's the biggest mistake teams make when developing quarterbacks?
Biggest mistake made developing quarterbacks. Putting them in the wrong hands maybe would be my best answer. There's a lot of guys that are good coaches but don't necessarily understand how to coach that position. There's a lot of over coaching that goes on. Guys want to look like the next quarterback whisperer. Things don't change. I was taught by Coach Parcells, and he had his quarterback commandments, that he stood by, that then I stood by, starting with no celebrity quarterbacks, so when I see a young guy come into the league and now all of a sudden he's doing commercials, to me, whoever's coaching him or responsible for him has not done his job as far as just do the things you have to do to become a real quarterback in the NFL before, you let the draft introductions and they make you a celebrity before you've even ever taken a snap.
Yeah.
So, I think just put a quarterback in good hands. And we talk about that all the time. Sam Darnold was not planted in a healthy garden with the Jets, so, and that didn't necessarily have to do with coaches, but just the whole situation. It was like looking at soil that was clay. You couldn't get a hoe into it. You couldn't get a shovel into it, but once he got in good hands, and I start with San Francisco with Kyle, and then Minnesota, and now, Kubiak and McDonald in Seattle. So, I think the biggest thing is just being put in hands that aren't capable of giving you the best chance to succeed.
I feel like there's a lot of pressure on Seattle to find somebody, whether that's in-house or external, that clicks with Sam and can keep this thing going. I think that's the biggest thing that fans get worried about with a defensive-minded head coach is that, all right, if you have a good offensive coordinator, he's going to get poached like Clint's about to be, and then you got to find a new guy to keep that train rolling. Is that something, at least in your time, that you've seen as a large struggle for people who are head coaches, CEO head coaches, whether it be on the defensive side of the ball or, like I said, a CEO head coach?
No, I mean, I don't care what side of the football you're on. Defense, offense, doesn't. Bill Parcells was a defensive-minded guy. That's how he cut his teeth. That's how he became the head coach for the Giants. But he saw the big picture, and he understood how to push buttons, coach, get the most out of everybody involved. So this league is about developing young players because you're always going to have injuries. You're going to have guys leave to go make more money. So you got to develop young players. That falls on the coaches, and then drafting or acquiring the right players in the first place. And you got to develop coaches. I mean, that is something that we're seeing with Sean McVay. We're seeing with Kyle Shanahan. When you start to see offspring come out of there, the LaFleurs and all those guys, that means they're developing coaches because you don't know, if you're winning games and you're doing a good job, you're going to lose coaches. So you better have somebody. So to me, always in-house, if you have a guy that you've developed and you feel really, really good about, that's the best way to go. So I would think, especially being late in the game here with Seattle, that there's probably somebody on that staff that Mike McDonald has identified as a guy that can step into those shoes. This isn't a surprise by any means. So they've had a lot of time to try to plan out what direction they're going to go.
Yeah, Bill Cowher was on the Dan Patrick show recently, and he talked about I coach the players hard, but I also coach the coaches hard because I wanted them to get better. And I think that is that something that resonates?
Absolutely. You got to develop coaches, and it's not always an easy job. It's much easier to pat everybody on the back and say, it's okay.
Right.
Your guy dropped 3 balls or your guy made 3 mental errors in the game. You gotta you gotta get guys better. And like I said, I working for, and I've referenced them now a bunch, but always this time of year it comes up is I always said working for Bill Parcells was like dog years. 1 = 7. You never could relax. But did it make me a better coach? Absolutely. Did it give me a chance to have success in the league? Absolutely. But while it was going on, I mean, you at times felt like a beat dog, and how you weathered that storm and continued to push forward was critical in your development.
Do you and Mike ever like have, I don't want to say confrontations, but has there been times where, whether the offense could have struggled during a game and Mike had to like, hey, what the hell? Let's fix some stuff. Like, is there any examples of that?
Totally different working environment with
Yeah.
Mike. I mean, and both great head coaches in my opinion. I mean, obviously Bill's in the Hall of Fame. I think Mike will be, but did it in a little different manner, and very, delegated in a great way, but challenged you more mentally, I would say. Just you didn't want to let a guy that you knew, cared so much about the team, and you didn't want to let that guy down. So different ways to motivate. Parcells was a little more confrontational, where Mike's was a little more cerebral. Even though Bill was really smart, don't get me wrong.
Sure. All right. Last one is a Bills related question from Bills Mafia Meg. She says, is Buffalo one big move away, or are we overrating the roster? If they can get Max Crosby and or AJ Brown on that team, that would be just catastrophically great for a Bills team that's just constantly knocking at the door. And I think have kind of been knocked down a peg after this past season where they didn't bring in really any star power, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and it came back to haunt them again. I think that if you're Brandon Beane, you got to be ultra aggressive and landing proven stars, because Josh Allen's going to be 30 the next time he's on the field. There's only so many years you're going to have of him playing at this level. So, I mean, you got to go balls to the wall and bring in some proven elite talent like we've seen the Rams do when they won the Super Bowl a few years ago, where they traded for a bunch of stars. We saw how it worked for Philly when they brought in AJ Brown. They went to a pair of Super Bowls and won one. They signed Saquon Barkley to go with that, helps them win the Super Bowl. I think you got to bring in proven elite players to help take you over this hump that you haven't been able to get over.
Yeah, another good question. I think, what is Joe Brady? What's it look like with him as a head coach? Kind of an unproven commodity, handling that role. Obviously a really good offense coordinator, but you still got to coach the team. So we got to see what that looks like. But once you get past that, assuming he's able to fill the shoes of a really good head coach and Sean McDermott, if that happens, then yes. And I think you got to, you at least have to have a playmaker on offense. You have Josh Allen. You got a chance to win week in and week out with him. He's already proven that. It doesn't matter any of the other variables, but you get him, a player that, whether it's through the draft, through a trade, whatever it is, somebody that, really is a go-to type guy for him with big-time ability, that'd be huge. And then defensively, I'm not sure Bosa's status, what he did from a contract standpoint, but you brought up Max. I mean, who in the NFL would not take Max Crosby right now? No questions asked. I mean, he's a difference maker guy. So, yeah, I mean, if you could get one on each side of the football, they still have a really good roster. They've done a good job of developing players, but if there's a missing piece, to me, it's a skill guy at the receiver position, and it's a defensive player that can prove he can stay healthy, stay out there, and be one of these Umanora type, Hamilton and Baltimore, one of those type of guys, or a pass rusher that's just a difference maker.
Yeah, and the price to get a guy like Max Crosby, he's still in his prime. It might cost you 2 first-round picks, but who are you going to take in the first round over those next 2 years that immediately makes as much of an impact as he will? Probably nobody. So, and looking at the Bills' recent history in drafting in the first 2 rounds, it hasn't been great. So, That's something I would certainly do without much hesitation, if that's what it takes to get Max Crosby. And if you can pull off an AJ Brown trade as well, yeah, like you might only end up with 4 draft picks in this year's draft. But again, you got to try to take advantage of this window while Josh Allen is still playing at this level. So hopefully we see them do that. I mean, you and I are both big Josh Allen guys. I want to see him win. And so if they are able to do that, they absolutely should find a way to do it. Didn't touch on the MVP or award stuff, but Matthew Stafford wins MVP. Myles Garrett wins Defensive Player of the Year. Did you have any thoughts, discrepancies on some award winners from last night? There was a controversy with the MVP, the closest race since 2003.
Yeah. No, I didn't have any problem. Even Coach of the Year. I mean, there's always guys you can say Kyle Shanahan, the job he did, but how can you argue with Mike Vrabel?
Sure.
How can you argue with Matthew or Myles Garrett? I mean, if Myles Garrett wasn't the defensive MVP, I would have kicked the TV over. But
unanimous Defensive Player of the Year, Myles Garrett.
Yeah. And we got our first Protector of the Year, which is an award that's long overdue.
Mm-hmm.
Offensive linemen do not get the recognition they deserve. There's no stats to really back up, some of the easier positions in football to deal with. So Joe Thuney, I mean, I love the board of guys that do it because they're all former linemen at different positions, whether it's Whitworth or Charles Bentley or Kelsey. I mean, they're all different positions. So I was really interested to see what direction they went. And if Thuney hadn't moved out to tackle at the end, I would have said they picked a guard. But, he showed versatility. So hats off to those guys, the offensive linemen. You can't say enough about them. They're kind of the motor that keeps any offense going.
In the MVP race, so Matthew Stafford gets 24 first place votes, rightfully so. I mean, you throw 46 touchdowns, only 8 interceptions, you're worthy of being the MVP. Drake May gets 23 first place votes, and again, understandably so. I wouldn't have batted an eye if Drake May did win it. Josh Allen gets 2, and Justin Herbert gets 1, which end up being the difference between Matthew Stafford and Drake May not getting it. So that's a little bit of a controversy in this MVP race.
Yeah, in my mind, it's Matthew all the way, and again, I'm really impressed with what Drake has done. But Matthew Stafford, to me, I mean, you talk about must-see TV. If it's not Josh Allen, it's him. I mean, you want to watch those guys play, and he gave them a chance right up until the end, to be playing in a couple days. So, no problem with that. Drake May's got some time now to build on this, and the Herbert thing was funny to me, and Josh Allen only getting 2 was a little funny, but I think it worked out the way it probably should have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that puts a bow on this final game preview show of the season, and then we'll get into stuff as the offseason goes on, getting ready for free agency, what trades could happen and whatnot. So keep everything locked in with us. We're not going anywhere, even though the season is ending. Todd's got a boatload of stories that I'm sure we'll get into over the next few months. So be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, leave a review, do all of that fun stuff. We'll be back next week after Super Bowl 60, and we'll talk to you then. It's the Pump Fake.